In this video, we're going to discuss China's recent social problems, their implications, which are stable but not secure. Now, this video, actually, we had done a week back with Dr. Christina Chen. Now, Christina Chen is a researcher, young researcher. She's a graduate of the University of Berkeley, University of California in Berkeley, and San Diego, where she did a PhD in international relations. And these days, she's a researcher at INDSR, Taiwan, which is a reputed think tank in Taiwan. Now, we had done this video, and I thought she came across in this video as a brilliant young woman with a lot of focus on China. She was keen to take on all kinds of questions. Why am I showing this video again and rerunning this video? It's because in that video, there was a technical glitch. Whatever I spoke echoed, and it wasn't good. So I've chopped off what all I had to speak or what I spoke, retained what Dr. Chen spoke. And I think she spoke a lot of sense. She took on a lot of difficult questions and tricky questions. All those questions I've retained. So I'm re-releasing this video. Please do have a look at it. I think it's important for everyone who wants to study China deeply to go through whatever Dr. Chen has said.
Thank you, General Shankar, for the introduction and for inviting me to your show. It is also my pleasure to have this opportunity to be on your show and to talk about social problems and implications in China. Thank you. And as General Shankar said, I'm going to talk a little about what's going on inside China, in recent times. So I'm going to focus more on the post 20 Party Congress, China's situation, and I think yes, there has been some social protest happening in China in recent time, and the white paper protest movement, for example, is something that the media has been talking about a lot, and that is something that is quite unusual since the Tiananmen Square, 1989 Tiananmen Square incident. So a lot of people compared the white paper to the 1989 Tiananmen Square incident and said, well, is that going to lead to revolution, or is that going to create instability for the Chinese Communist Party regime? I think, even though we've been observing a few social protests right after the 20 Party Congress, I think the situation in China right now, I could say it's still stable. So there seems to be this persistent stability inside China. It is not because of the lack of social economic problems. In fact, I will show you that there's quite a lot of social economic problems, and General Shankar actually did mention those. So there are sources of instability in China. However, because the Chinese Communist regime so far has been able to suppress the dissents and the people's protests and related activities. So from what we see, it seems kind of stable. But let me go back to the protests. I mean, I noted three particular social protests after the 20 Party Congress. The white paper being one, and one that is, as I said, caught the media's attention, and people really curious about it. And the white paper social protest is essentially, it happened in several Chinese cities across China, and many people participated in the white paper. And this is because people were frustrated with the CCP's zero COVID policy, which has lasted, I think, over 2 years. So, I mean, during the time of the COVID pandemic, other countries, different countries came up with different, ways to control the pandemic. China is on the more extreme side. China chose the zero COVID, a very draconian, very tight control system. And so the Chinese people were very frustrated, not because the infections and the pandemic themselves, but because of the policy. The policy has led to a series of disasters. People were in a sustained period of lockdown. Their livelihoods were affected. They couldn't go out, and they had to go through this almost daily testing, and that was really, really painful. So the white paper was the result of Chinese public being frustrated. They're mad about this kind of draconian zero COVID. So that's the white paper. And also, I think what's so special about the white paper protest is that the public could identify the central authorities as the ones behind pushing for the zero COVID. In fact, Xi Jinping himself was the one pushing for the zero COVID, even though there's stories about officials telling Xi Jinping maybe it's time to relax the control, but Xi Jinping personally thought that zero COVID was the policy, so he insists on that. So I think part of the reason white paper movement broke out, people participated in this because people were frustrated, and then people identify Xi Jinping and the central government as the culprits behind those, I would say, inhumane policies. And after the white paper, during the time of the Chinese New Year, there was the protest. Again, it happened in two different Chinese cities, and the protest was about this local regulations prohibiting the use of fireworks. So people wanted to celebrate the Chinese New Year, and traditional way of celebration is fireworks, using firecrackers or fireworks. But the Chinese government said no to that, and people early this year during the Chinese New Year time, people protested about it because they wanted, they were just out of the lockdown, so they want to celebrate the Chinese New Year. Yet the government said no, you can't do that. So they were frustrated again, people went on the street and protest. So that was the firework protest. And then about a month after that, it was the white hair, or I think in America we call them gray hair. So it referred to elderly people. Elderly people were not happy. They went onto the street and they protested because of medical insurance. Their medical insurance, there's a medical insurance reform in Wuhan city and Dalian city, so in two cities at least. And these elderly people felt that the medical insurance reform would affect their medical package, their benefits. So they were so mad that they went onto the street to protest. So yes, I mean, in a short amount of time, from October last year till like March, before March this year, we saw 3 large-scale protests occurring in different Chinese cities, and they involved different groups of people. I mean, the white paper social protest was about young people leading the protest. The white hair, on the other hand, was elderly people, senior citizens. So these protest movements involve different groups of people, which show that I think general Chinese public was really, really frustrated with their lives. So that anger, that frustration, led to these protests. However, I would still say that so far the CCP was able to control the society, to maintain its control over society. So after white hair, especially after 2 sessions, which took place in March this year, at least from the outside, we haven't observed any occurrence of large-scale social protest. So White Hair was pretty much it. After that, from March until like June, we haven't really seen a large scale social protest in China. And I think that shows something about the CCP's ability to maintain control. And going back to the White Hair and those protests, there are stories about the Chinese authorities arresting the protesters, using ways to kind of crack down these protests. So my belief is that, yes, we have been observing these large-scale social protests, but because those protests, they're kind of unique in some sense, and also because the Chinese Communist Party was still able to exert tight control over society, so there seems to be persistent stability so far. But um, is there a slide for me to?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, I'd like to shift to the next
Yeah,
one.
yeah. Wait. 1 minute.
Okay,
1 minute. Wait, yeah. This one, next one.
next, and we're going next. Yeah. The
Yeah.
one after. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think this is what General Shankar has pointed out in the introduction. Even though I think so far we've seen persistent stability, it doesn't mean that, especially from the CCP's point of view, that the society is secured. And I think I want to mention this or emphasize this lack of insecurity because recall the 20-Party Congress working report. In that work report, Xi Jinping, when he delivered the work report, he mentioned the term security so many times. In fact, I think people went back to count the number of times the term security show up. It was like more than 90 times, in that work report. So I think that shows how insecure Xi Jinping and the CCP have been feeling, about their ability to stay in power. So for the CCP, for Xi Jinping, security is very, very important. So even though they seem to be able to get a hold onto the Chinese society through censorship, through repression, and other hardline controls, I think from their perspective, from their own point of view, it's never secured. And this is especially true because General Shankar pointed out that in China, we are seeing a lot of problems. Speaking of the economy, the economy is not doing well. There seems to be a slowdown. And we recall the two sessions which took place in March. The former premier Li Keqiang, he delivered the expected growth target for this year, which came to be like 5% GDP growth. This is a very modest growth target compared to the previous years. And this 5% is lower than the one that was given by international institutions and other banking and financial experts. So this shows that the CCP is very conservative, and they know that because the economy is not doing well and will continue to not do well. That's why they gave this very modest growth target, 5%, very, very low. And, economic-wise, we're not seeing much room for improvement. The so-called three drivers for Chinese economic growth, which are exports, investments, and
Infrastructure.
yes, I mean consumption. These three, so far we haven't seen much improvement and much progress, which was contrary to the normal expectation, because the normal expectation was that once the country is out of this COVID zero COVID policy, once the country is back to so-called normal, we will see those three drivers making progress. However, up till now, consumption did not go up. The public in China, the consumers did not have much confidence to spend. Exports, based on what we're seeing, based on the figures, I mean, it did not really go up either. Not to mention investments. I mean, the Chinese Communist Party tried to court the FDI, tried to court the investors back. I don't think they've made much progress there. So, economic-wise, we're seeing this continuation of slowdown. General Shankar also mentioned in unemployment. Unemployment is especially a problem for the Chinese young people, which are, these used to be very talented, very, intelligent, Chinese students. I mean, the education system in China is such that it's very competitive. So these young people were expected to have a very bright future. However, the current stage situation is such that these Chinese young people couldn't find a job. In fact, I think the latest unemployment number is that unemployment for the young people is 20%, at least 20%. So that means 1 out of every 5 young people in China is out of work. So that is very, very serious problem, not just for the people themselves, but also for the Chinese Communist Party. And I talked about the occurrence of the large-scale social protest. We're also seeing some, smaller-scale protests or labor conflicts. If you're talking about labor strikes or, the labor protest, they're also increasing in the numbers, especially after the lifting of the zero COVID policy, because factories they went back to operations, but the employees continue to complain to the point that they engage in strikes and related actions, because even though the factories were back into work, the employers, the factory owners did not have money to pay those employees. So these employees the workers were not happy, so they went out to the street to protest, or they staged strikes. So we're also seeing some signs of smaller scale social protest and collective actions taking place in China. And but I still think that given those problems, we will not see another large-scale social protest like the white paper movement in the near future. And that is because, as I said, the CCP so far has been able to maintain a very tight control over Chinese society. But because these social economic challenges are in place, and so far, I don't think the CCP is able to resolve those challenges. I mean, those problems will become worse in the near future. So I think those problems, they will manifest in some other extreme social problems. For example, suicides. There's media reports about strings of collective mass suicides among young people. It's started off in March this year. Report about young people, they met online on the internet, and they just met in a certain spot, and they decided to jump off the cliff or engage in suicide behaviors. That similar incident happened at least twice in different parts of China. So I use this as an example to show that while we may not see another large-scale social protest in the near future, we will continue to see some extreme social problems happening in China. And these will be the problems that the CCP, the Chinese government, have to deal with. They have to try to resolve those. But I'm pessimistic about their ability to resolve those issues. Can I go to the next slide, please? Okay, so as I said, the CCP is fully aware of the challenges that it has in its hands. There's a lot of unemployment, economy is doing bad, and workers are not happy, elderly are not happy, etc. What are their responses to those problems? Their response is, I would call it a vicious cycle, because they started off by um, tightening control over the society in the first place. But once they see more challenges and more problems, their response is to increase control over the society. And this time they wanted to tighten their control through institutions. So people who look at China, they would see if Chinese authorities or the CCP is interested in 维权, protecting the citizens, people's rights, or 维稳, repressing, controlling people. I think in this case, the CCP has chosen to continue, repressing the people, 维稳, to maintain stability. So, in other words, that means the CCP would do anything that it could do to make sure that it will have tight control over the society, because we want to make sure that the regime will stay in power, will not be challenged by the people. So early this year, during the Lianghui, the two sessions, the CCP passed a series of measures, and one of them involved this very drastic institutional reforms. And this is a package, so through this they created different work departments. One of them was the establishment of the Central Social Work Department, or 中央社会工作部. So this social work department would be in charge of several functions. And I think the two most important functions of this department, this newly created social work department, was first to coordinate and guide the handling of petitions through the Unified National Public Complaints and Proposal Administration. So this petition system has been around in China for many years. So what this new department would do is to kind of enhance oversight and control over the pre-existing petition system. In other words, I think the party, the CCP, wants to get its grip onto the petition system. And then the second important function for the department is to promote grassroots party building in national industry or associations, chambers of commerce, and various types of non-state firms and enterprises. So two important functions from this newly created Central Social Work Department is, first of all, to increase party control over the pre-existing petition system. The petition system is one that will allow the Chinese citizens to air their grievances and hopefully to use the petition system to get compensated. So that is one thing. The other one is to promote grassroots party organizations. So they want to build grassroots party organs in non-state enterprises, in private firms, in other words, and in those business associations, chamber of commerce, and etc. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
So I think the establishment of the social work department would help, and this is the intention of the CCP, is to strengthen, as I said, strengthen the party's oversight and control in society and economic sector. So the party felt, Xi Jinping and the CCP were not secured. Going back to my earlier point, that they were not feeling secured about their ability to stay in power, and they recognize that there's a lot of challenges from below, social, political, social, economic challenges, and they felt really insecure about being in power. So their solution to this is to use institutions to hopefully to increase their presence and therefore their ability to maintain control over society. So the main function of this newly created social work department is to strengthen the party and Xi Jinping's leadership. They want to use these new department and the functions to strengthen its rule and control over society and various aspects of society, not just economic sector, but also other sectors. And because it involved the reform of the petition system or the integration coordination of the pre-existing petition system, I think the CCP wants to use this new department, social work department, to get more information from below, from the grassroots. And I think the logic behind for the CCP is that the party felt that it is because it did not have the information from the grassroots, from below, that caused a lot of challenges and a lot of social unrest, social protests. So I think the party felt that by having its control over the petition system, it could get more information from from below, from the grassroots level, so that could help the party prevent problems, prevent challenges from below. And the third, I think the third point or third implication from this newly created department was this continuation of 国进民退, state enterprises advance, private sector retreat. I want to emphasize this because the party leaders kept talking about they want to get the investors back. They want to reinvigorate the private economy. They are all about economic growth and so forth. And they didn't really talk about this 国进民退, the state enterprises advance, private sector retreat. They kind of stopped talking about it. But I think in reality, this institution, the creation of this social work department and the function, showed that the party was still serious about implementing this 国进民退, or the state enterprises advance, private sector retreat. So, the party, it's all about words. They're calling the private the investors FDI back. They want the private enterprises to feel confident about investing, about operating in China. In reality, I think the party is not going to let go of this 国进民退 idea. It's continuing to push that by promoting the grassroots party organizations in the private enterprises, the non-state enterprises. I think the party is all about 国进民退. It wants to have more control over these non-state enterprises, these non-state firms. So the private enterprises, if they ever think about staying in China or they want to increase their investments, they should think twice, because the party is going to be there, and try to control these private enterprises through the grassroots party organizations. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
So I think all in all, the implications for the near term is, as my title suggests, we will not see a large-scale protest happening in the near future, because, as I said, the white paper social protest is unique in some senses. It was a collective frustration felt by the Chinese public against a COVID policy that is very draconian, that is very harsh. And but the party was able to kind of disperse those protests right away. And the party was still able to use the various means of control to maintain, so-called stability. So we will not see another large-scale social protest in the near future. However, that does not mean the party is free from challenges. In fact, the party has to deal with a lot of social, political, social, economic challenges from within the Chinese society. And the party responded by coming up with this institution, this social work department, which was the party's way to tighten its control over the society. But because this new institution is not there to resolve the Chinese people's problems, I mean, those problems will be there, but they will continue to be suppressed by the party. So the problems are still there. The problems will get worse. So my prediction is that there's going to be more tensions in the Chinese society. So state-society relations will become even more. There's going to be more conflicts in the future, and that will take the CCP more and more effort, more and more resources to control, to repress. And the public, the society will become more and more frustrated with the Chinese Communist Party's hardline rule. So that's my prediction. And then in terms of the Taiwan Strait situation, because people say that when there's increasing pressure from within, the CCP or the regime in power will be likely to divert the pressure, using conflicts to divert the pressure. But I don't think diversion will create large-scale conflict. In other words, I don't think the rising domestic challenges will prompt the Chinese Communist Party to wage war or invasion against Taiwan. However, I think the CCP will continue to use the so-called gray zone activities as a way to divert the domestic pressure. So we will see more gray zone harassment, economic coercions, for example, or the aircrafts flying across the median line of the Taiwan Strait. These kind of activities or cyber attacks, these kind of activities will continue and will probably amplify in the near future if we follow the diversion theory. And I think diversion, yes, it will take place because the Chinese Communist Party is facing a lot of challenges from within. But diversion in the sense of gray zone activities, not invasion or war in the Taiwan Strait. So that's what I have to say. Thanks. I agree with you that there is a lot of contradictions. I think this reflects the party. The party wants, because from what I said, it's feeling very insecure. And before Xi Jinping came to power, the Chinese Communist Party, the way to get people to support the party or their way to legitimize their rule is mainly through economic growth. It's
Yes.
not really about ideology. It's about using economic growth to support the people, and that was the old way. And I think now it seems more and more certain, at least from my point of view, is that it's not about growth anymore. They talk about high quality growth. I think that's just a name, a pseudonym for we know that we will not be able to return to that double digit GDP growth as used to be. So we will be content with modest growth. I think that's even the CCP realize that the from their own direction, because they want stability, regime stability in essence. So they rather, I don't think they really realize that, but I think the mindset of the Chinese communist elite is that stability is so important that they're willing to sacrifice a little economic growth. But over the time, we've seen Xi Jinping's and the CCP's policy is really killing the private sector. Especially for over the last couple of years, not only with the zero COVID, but Xi Jinping's very massive way of suppressing the housing sector and technology, right? Alibaba and those
Yeah.
tycoons, So they really did things to the private sector that put an end to the previous time during the reform opening era. So I think economic wise, they realize that it's not going to be like before, and I don't think I think they're okay with it. Because they got themselves in this trap. I think they got themselves in this dilemma, which is that it's really about economic growth in order to maintain legitimacy. but because they got themselves into this dilemma, they could it's hard for them to go back. And Xi Jinping, I think it also had to do with his personal belief that he's kind of leftist. He's a kind of more a follower of Mao's thought. So a lot of the policies that he talked about or he promoted, common prosperity, for example, was about, yes, equality, but the way they implemented created a lot of problems, to the point that there's no longer private sector innovations and growth. The local governments had no room for promoting growth. And yes, yeah, those tycoons, they made a lot of money, so rich, they enriched themselves so much, but these private sectors were also contributors to jobs. But once you kind of put a cap on them, that's where we're at. The situation with a lot of unemployment, young people. I mean, these young people, they used to dream about going to the technology sector. They wanted to go to real estate and others. I mean, but now those industries, those
They're
sectors,
not there at all.
yeah. So I think from the speaking of the economy, I think the CCP will continue with this so-called high quality growth, which is it's not the
Right.
old way. Yeah.
Okay. So my second question is, now it's pretty clear that the Chinese economy will not grow earlier the way it is earlier.
Yeah.
And the people, they're not going to solve the people's problems. So are you going to see an overall degeneration of the Chinese system to the point where they'll start externalizing either towards Taiwan or towards India?
Are you talking about the aggression?
Yes.
Externalizing. Okay. Yeah, so I think during the last point, when I talked about unification, I do believe there's going to be some kind of externalizing, because the internal pressures are there, and I think they're going to increase in the near future. Definitely, for sure, they're going to go up. Given the CCP has shown very little solutions to deal with those challenges. They're only trying to put control on those problems. Externalizing, whether they will cause a large scale war, I personally don't think that's the case for near future. Because you're probably the expert in this more than I do, but in terms of People's Liberation Army, they have expanded and modernized their their power over the last couple of years, but still I don't think they are quite there to have confidence in a war against Taiwan. And I think also because, I mean, if they do want to engage in invasion of Taiwan, they want to make sure that it's a quick invasion, not something that will last, long before the, international or the United States intervene. So I think from the military perspective, the PLA is not ready to do that. So I think that's probably not the option on their hands right now. But I think they'll continue to try to divert the domestic pressure by using, gray zone activities, which is what I said, and maybe, also things like drills, military drills, things that we've seen, last August or, this March, when after Tsai Ing-wen, President Tsai, went to California and visited McCarthy. So things like this may continue to happen in the future as their way to kind of externalize their domestic pressures. So the first question, as a Taiwanese, how do I feel about China normalizing military hostility? I personally hate it as Taiwanese. I think that's just very bad. They really don't. They should not do it, but they continue to do it, and that general Taiwanese public are used to it. I think. Many of us in Taiwan, we've been kind of under this for many years. I mean, since the most notable ones in 1996, right? The missile crisis. They've been doing this kind of scare tactics, and really, yes, nowadays they are trying to normalize it by kind of encroaching upon the so-called medium line. So they are using what I said, the gray zone activities to kind of blur the line and to kind of take advantage. But I think overall, the Taiwanese people are kind of used to the situation, which is good and bad. Good thing is that we don't panic, that much. But the bad thing is that we get kind of numb to this, and I think this partly serves their purpose. Their purpose is to do it inch by inch, slowly, and we don't really notice. So it's good and bad. It's good and bad.
Okay.
Second question is the solution. Oh, well, I think the government, CCP tried really hard. One part of the solution is to mobilize the state sector. So they ask the state firms to increase, job slots, or to create these so-called temporary positions for people. So and another solution is to ask the colleges to kind of delay the graduates, so kind of prolong the college students year of study, ask them to delay their graduation so they will not have to enter the workforce and job market and find themselves trapped in this situation. The latest one is Xi Jinping telling the Chinese people, it's the Chinese young people, you should go to the countryside.
Countryside, yeah.
Yeah.
I heard that. Yeah.
Right. So he's doing the same thing.
Yeah.
The young people to go to countryside. And this is maybe it worked before, but now, I mean, those young people, they are, as I said, they're very bright. Right? Young people, college graduates, I don't think that's what they want. Okay, so pro-integration, I guess that means pro-unification.
Pro-unification.
Political parties in Taiwan. Okay. I would say that's not merely Chinese information warfare. In fact, in Taiwan, we know some parties are more about pro-unification, or nowadays, I mean, they don't really talk about it because the majority of the Taiwanese, there's actually surveys asking about Taiwanese opinion regarding this issue, and I recall that the majority of the Taiwanese would say they support status quo, which is kind of ambiguous. I mean, if the Taiwanese, they don't really want to say I'm pro-independent, but pro-unification is the minority. It's less than 10%. So it's getting out of favor. And so the political parties in Taiwan, even if they were more pro-unification, nowadays they kind of stop talking about it. Okay, I'm not sure about this one, but my personal opinion is that in China, people really are getting less and less, variety of information. So it's a lot of propaganda. They're fed a lot of propaganda. So my feeling is that they probably the majority of the Chinese people will tend to accept the official position on things like issues like this. I mean, if it's about Taiwan, I can tell you for sure that the majority of the Chinese people are pro unification with Taiwan. That's for sure. They probably wouldn't hesitate about using force, supporting their government to use force to unify Taiwan. But if it's about unification, by all means, that's probably near 100% of the Chinese public will say yes. And that's this long-term propaganda. from a historical perspective, I mean, I'm not a historian, but my
That's
understanding
okay.
is that
Take a
before
shot at it. Take a best shot at it.
1949, China
Yeah.
did experience a period of more democratic or different regimes. They had the KMT regime before.
Yeah.
And then before KMT, from the Qing Emperor dynasty to it's kind of chaotic there. So
Yeah, what 30 years? 30 years from 1917 to
yeah.
1949, you had a
So
yeah.
I'm not sure if it's the people used to this kind of autocratic regime. It's just probably they didn't have the choice. And after all, the CCP came to power. When they came to power, they say it's the party for the people. It's the for the people. So they contradict themselves. I would say that there's already signs where people have lost their trust in the regime. But it's because I kept talking about the party's control. The control is so strong that they dare not to speak against the party. But that is so far. My feeling is that if there's something that's like the white paper, a policy that leads to this collective suffering, then the tensions will build up and will become a collective action. And then I think recall the 1989 Tiananmen Square, it almost succeed. The movement almost succeed, and part of the reason that Tiananmen was almost successful is because part of the CCP elite participated on the protester side. So one one factor for revolution or for social movement to succeed in challenging the regime is part of the elites from the CCP have to join the people. But we didn't really see this happening in the white paper. So that's why the white paper, part of the reason that it did not last. This is a good question. I can answer this because our institute, we have this survey about Taiwanese military opinion of military and security affairs. And we have been conducting this survey since the end of 2021. So we have conducted several waves. And we do ask this question consistently. And the majority of the Taiwanese, it kind of fluctuate over time, but overall, the majority of the Taiwanese say yes. There's this trust in U.S. Willingness to intervene. But I think right after the Ukrainian attack, that went down. So the Ukraine experience did have an initial impact on Chinese opinion.
But now it must be going up all over again. Now the trust after 1 year of Ukraine must have started growing up all over again, no?
Yes, it went up. And after the Pelosi visit, it went up.
Yes, I agree with you completely. I covered the Pelosi visit quite a bit. I wrote a lot about it.